Welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast. I'm Gerry Scott, founder of the Snowbirds US Day Tracker and the Canada Physical Presence Tracker app. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're listening to this podcast. We have this is going to be one of those shows that it's not going to be based on tax. It's not going to be based on US immigration. It really was one of those podcasts that came out of demand. We have a lot of snowbirds that are shipping their cars down south and they're shipping them home. And I've gone through the personal experience myself of shipping a vehicle over to Maui. So we were asked, and we love doing this. We love to make sure that we can get these shows that people can actually learn from. So today we actually have Adam Horodnyk on the Horodnyk, and Adam was telling me how to pronounce his name. His father started the business in 1981. And this really hits home because I was telling Adam before we started recording that I grew up in a trucking family. My father was a mechanic truck driver, and the company was called Scott and Sons Trucking. And I'm the only son that did not participate in the trucking business. So Adam's company is called TFX International. Adam's business has grown over the years. Like I say, it was started by his father, and they basically have grown it into a very large provider of these snowbirds that are shipping vehicles down south or bringing them up north here. It's not just limited to the snowbirds. It's actually open to all kinds of things. And Adam was telling me about his involvement with the Barrick Jackman show down in Scottsdale. That's the one that I'm familiar with, and I have made a commitment to go down with my younger brother to go to one of those auctions one of these days. So, Adam, welcome to the show, and what else can you tell us about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. And yeah, TFX was founded back in the 80s by my father, and we've been doing this for a very long time, exclusively shipping cars and motorcycles all over North America. And we're currently, we started with one truck, and we currently have, I think, around 35 trucks running all over North America at any given time. And definitely a large part of our business historically and currently has been servicing the snowbird markets. So, your standard Toronto, Montreal, down into Florida and the Carolinas, Georgia, and then Toronto out into California, Arizona, Mexico, and in more recent years we've expanded into the Western market, and we've been doing quite a bit of business from Vancouver area, of course, and the interior BC, and then Edmonton, Calgary, and other parts of Alberta down into mostly the Southwest. I mean, you don't have a ton of snowbirds from the Western Canadian provinces going into Florida. But definitely there are a couple, and people, especially since 2008, 2009, kind of when the Americans had their financial crisis, or I guess you would call it, the amount of people that purchased homes down there in the Southwest from Western Canada, and kind of a perfect storm at that point with the economy so good in the West in Canada, and then the housing market so bad in the U.S. and the dollar being so powerful, our purchasing power. It was kind of the perfect storm to create a demand there for our business, and we've been able to service it. And also, like further to your point before, through the Barrick Jackman auction, I mean, our Western Canadian customers especially have they purchased a lot of cars there, and we've met a lot of people who have homes down there, and and then it grows organically through friends and word of mouth. And so, yeah, we do quite a bit of it. It's definitely a part of our business that we enjoy, and one that's excellent for us because it's every single customer is unique and individual, and it certainly beats having one customer who you could potentially lose the next day, and then you have to start over. Every single one of our snowbirds is valuable, and it's very hard to lose that kind of business as you build it.
So I guess the first question, and I'm going to go, a lot of these questions are just going to come off come to mind as I'm thinking about my own personal experience. So explain the entire process. I've got this car that's I'm going to say that I'm in Tobico, just like yourself and Rob right now. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing it right. But let's say, for example, I've got a sports car. Let's fantasize here. It's a Ferrari. It's registered in Canada, and I'm going to ship it to. I'm going to pretend, once again, be on the East Coast. I'm going to ship it down to Fort Lauderdale. How do I start that process?
So it's actually we've got it nailed down pretty well. So what you would do is you'd call our office. Typically, that's the best way to go about it, or you would send in an email through our free quote, and then we would price it for you, which is pretty straightforward. This year, I think our price is right around $2,500 from Toronto to Fort Lauderdale, Canadian. And then what we would do is we'd give you a list of potential dates that we have availability. Given that it's a car, you'd have a little bit more flexibility than if it was a big SUV, because we can only fit so many big SUVs on one of our enclosed carriers. And so, for instance, let's say you said, okay, Adam, I want to be there for, whatever it would be, Halloween, for instance. Okay. So we'd say, okay, we've got a truck departing Toronto on or about the 23rd of October. That's going to deliver between the 27th and the 30th. Now, we can't nail down a specific day it'd be delivered, but it would be one of those 3 days. And then as the driver goes down, depending on traffic conditions and difficulties with his other deliveries and so on and so forth, he would narrow it down to a day at a time, and he would stay in communication on the phone. And then the day before, he'd kind of say, okay, tomorrow's the 29th. I'll be at your house in Fort Lauderdale between 10 and noon, and then he would show up. He would deliver the vehicle. You could have some of your personal effects inside the vehicle. We allow people to put up to 100 pounds, so kind of we look at it as like 2 suitcases. Anything more than that starts to screw us up on weight with respect to where we put the vehicles in the truck. And then when you go through the weigh scales on your way down with the trucks, you can actually get put on service and not be allowed to continue because you're 400 pounds over on a certain axle, for instance. So we allow you to pack the car with that 100 pounds, and then the car is delivered. You have your stuff, you have your car, you've done all the paperwork in advance with our office, so the car went over the border seamlessly. And we offer that service as kind of an add-on within our transport included in the price. And then and you get your car and it's been enclosed, it's clean, it's perfect, and you go and have a nice winter and avoid the Canadian snow.
So you would have all the customs papers would be filled out. Now the car would continue to be insured on the Canadian side, and it would have to be, yes, it would clear customs, and you would have all the proper forms, but then you would have to go to your local car insurance, and they would register the car in Florida and all the road tests. So once that, excuse me, once that car is delivered, then those people have another process they have to go through. Is that correct?
If you did want to send a car down there temporarily, that's one way, but you can also send them permanently, which, is a little more difficult, and there's kind of different paperwork you would need depending on the age and where it was built and so on and so forth. But we can facilitate that paperwork as well. It's just a little bit trickier and a little more time consuming, and there would be costs involved in hiring customs brokers and potential U.S. duties and so on and so forth. But it is doable depending on the car, and we do it every week.
So you say it's very common for people just to ship their vehicle down for 6 months at a time?
Absolutely. Okay. We probably, I won't throw any numbers out there, but we do a sizable amount of vehicles down to the U.S. just temporarily and then bring them back. There'll be round trip transports of people's vehicles. And again, a lot of snowbirds, at least is what I've found is, there's the type of snowbirds that will buy a vehicle and leave it at their U.S. home, right? But there's also people who would might own, and you said Ferrari, if you're buying a Ferrari, the current market, they're quite expensive. $500,000, I think, is about your entry point in a new Ferrari these days. If you're buying one of those cars, you're probably not going to leave it at one home. You're probably going to want to move it back and forth, and the cost to do that would be significantly less than the cost to buy one and have it sitting somewhere depreciating and being insured. And so I mean, there's a lot of people who want to bring them back and forth and use them at both of their homes, definitely, and especially in the higher end vehicles.
Okay. So here's another issue that I'm personally speaking of. So a couple of years ago in Maui, we bought a brand new Jeep. Are you seeing a lot of people that are buying these vehicles and say, you know what, we're going to sell our place in Maui, or we're going to no longer go to Maui, so we're going to ship this vehicle back? Is there a lot of problems with us having to get it registered, and do you run into warranty problems or anything like that? Do you ever come across that kind of stuff?
Coming back into Canada.
Yeah, they buy the vehicle in the United States, and now they want to move that vehicle back up to Canada.
Right. So, I mean, that's something we do regularly. The warranty issues, potential ones, I don't think there's many. I can't speak to that. I think it would differ from manufacturer to manufacturer, but definitely as far as bringing it into Canada, there's a list of vehicles on the government website that are admissible into Canada. And as long as it's on that list that Transport Canada will allow in, we can import them. It's a little bit tricky. You have to do a proper export process from the U.S. and file paperwork with U.S. Customs and stop and get it stamped by U.S. Customs before you export the vehicle from the U.S. into Canada. And then there's paperwork, of course, on the Canadian side and taxes associated with the import. But people do it regularly.
Okay, interesting. Now, I know that we, excuse me, we had a vehicle, a family vehicle that we had for years, and we shipped it off to Maui. Once my daughter drove it for a few years and kind of destroyed it, we thought it'd be worth more having this little beater in Maui. And there were restrictions that we had to make sure there was no gas in it, maybe because they had to ship it by sea. Maybe that was a bigger issue, but we also had to, there was nothing. We couldn't put anything in the vehicle whatsoever. As soon as that vehicle landed, we had to get it registered in the state of Maui and pay taxes and stuff. Do you find that when it is shipping that there are more serious concerns that we have to deal with? Ocean shipping?
Definitely, when you're shipping on a big ship, there's different concerns for making sure that things are safe. And I would assume that they don't want a lot of fuel in vehicles in case of a fire. It could become very problematic if one vehicle blew up. And thankfully that's not a problem that we have to worry about in the over the road trucking. We are allowed to. You can have vehicle with fuel. We actually like the cars to have fuel because then they don't run out of gas and we don't have to push them or winch them, which we can do as well if we need to. We do a lot of classic cars, and the classic cars, especially with the big engines and stuff, sometimes the people forget to put fuel in them, or the dealers who sold them to a new person might not put fuel, or my dad always has the joke that nobody sells a car with a good battery or a full tank of fuel. And we seem to come across that regular.
Oh, I bet. So a couple more questions for you. So what is the big difference that you guys are providing that other providers might be in the same market but don't provide? What differentiates the TFX against your competitors?
We kind of have set the industry standard. It's funny when you said about your father being in trucking, you're the only one that didn't follow him. My dad, I'm with him every single day, and he has all these sayings that some of them annoy me, but they typical father-son stuff, but they do stick with me. And one thing my dad always says is we don't have competitors, we have imitators. And it's interesting because we've done so many things in our industry, being in it so long, and my father being kind of an innovative guy, that we've been able to set the bar repeatedly for what needs to be done. But what I go back to regularly, and what separates us from other people is that I think it's hard work. We have great equipment. Equipment's very important in our business because you're only as good as your equipment, and your drivers are very important as well. So if you have good equipment, you usually attract good drivers. But if you have good equipment, it usually means you care. And I mean that as part of the ownership group. cares. There's not a lot of trucking companies out there where the owners, once they start to do well, financially, they stop wanting to get out of bed at 7:00 a.m. on a Sunday morning when it's snowy outside to go push a CUDA that won't start into a trailer to make sure there's no problem. Whereas in our business, I mean, my drivers can call me any time of the week. They can call my managers, who are, most of them are family, any time of the week. They can call my father anytime, day or night, and we'll help them. And that there's a real benefit to having an ownership group and a group of people there that really want to make sure that things are done correctly. The older I get, the more I realize that, we've had competition where they go out, they buy some of these brand new trailers, but they can't fix them. They don't know, they can't work them. And, it really comes down to just the people that are in the business and that knowledge that we've gained through so many trials and tribulations over the years. And all, you ship 13,000 cars a year like we do. You see some things, and then, you make mistakes over the years, and you don't make those mistakes again.
Well, we've had the opportunities to work with a lot of different industries and business owners and stuff, and that's the biggest thing is no matter what the industry is if you care about what you're doing and the services and products that you're going to offer, that is that's the biggest tangible that you can provide. So it doesn't matter. Every business is saying the same thing. Not saying the same thing. They're not living up to it, but those that do care do an excellent job. So I believe my dad has said the same thing many, many years, but he still couldn't talk me into going to the trucking business. But the other thing is that, so another question is that I'm down at the Barrett-Jackman auction. I buy that dream car. How do I get a hold of you, or how does that work if I'm on the U.S. side and I'm trying to ship that brand new vehicle that I bought and I want to ship it to Vancouver? How does that process look like?
So let's say, for instance, we're at we use Barrett-Jackson as a very good example because they are the absolute class act of auctions in the world, in my opinion. So Barrett-Jackson's going on, you buy a vehicle. We are actually on site at those auctions. So we would be where you go to pay for your vehicle or register to bid. They've got an office on site at Westworld in Scottsdale. You would actually physically walk over, and I would be sitting there, or one of my staff, and we would talk. We would figure out how we're going to price this. We would figure out what it is, where it's going, and we would make sure that we signed everything up right there, did all the paperwork, got you to sign off on any forms we needed, and then you could literally fly home the next day, and I would make sure the vehicle comes out of the auction, gets loaded, gets across the border, that there's absolutely no issues, and we work directly with the auction house. So that particular auction company, we have a program set up with them, and that it's a pretty good program, and it really just takes the guesswork out of it for buying, but also for selling. That's the other thing that people sometimes forget, is that there's a lot of Canadians who want to take advantage of the U.S. dollar by selling their classic cars in the U.S. at auction, and also want to take advantage of the fact that the market's 10 times the size of the Canadian market, and the cars are worth more when they're in the U.S. Advertising a car from Canada in Canada immediately would isolate some buyers and scare off other buyers. But if the car is sitting at auction in the U.S., we can enter it into the U.S. economy as far as getting the customs paperwork done. We can even actually have a U.S. title on the vehicle, so that when it sells at auction, your vehicle is being sold U.S. titled with absolutely no issues. So the buyers can bid and purchase with confidence, which obviously, the more confident the buyer is and the more comfortable they feel, the higher the price you're going to be able to sell your car for. And you're getting U.S. dollars. So, I mean, there's a huge benefit. We've actually seen quite the swing the last few years versus when the Canadian dollar was strong. In people selling versus buying. There's still the buyers. People, if you want the car, they're not making any more 70 CUDAs or 67 Corvettes. So, if you want the honey, you got to go to the beehive. But it's you're seeing a lot more Canadians selling their cars in the U.S. now versus purchasing them. Just because, and again, the demographics are changing too. I think that the people, the guys my dad's age, he's 66, born in 57. a lot of these guys are divesting their collections and kind of focusing on a few really nice pieces, more expensive cars versus having a ton of cars. I think in any collectible industry, you find that people, when they start collecting, they want to buy everything, and then as they get more educated, they want to focus on a couple nice pieces versus the quantity. And so you're seeing a lot of these collections getting sold, and little, my guy might sell 7 and buy 2, things like that are happening. But I mean, we have guys who come down and ladies as well that have, we've sold 100 car collections before on our. We haven't physically sold them ourselves. I mean, through Barrett Jackson, we facilitated the logistics, customs, when people are getting rid of these cars and kind of moving their money into different things.
Now, are there any issues when it comes to, I buy that car at the auction? Now, is there an insurance package? Am I buying that through you to ship the vehicle from Scottsdale to Vancouver? Or is there, I would think that Barrett Jackman would have an entire package so that that car can get to my driveway with a limited liability that I would hope for.
So, that's a great question, and it's one that I get a lot. What happens is the second the gavel comes down, you haven't taken ownership of the car yet, but you essentially have agreed that you were going to own that car. You're going to have a bank letter. You're going to have, there's a significant amount of legal documents that you're going to have already signed off in order to be a bidder at an auction like Barrett Jackson. So you own the car. So what I usually advise people, while the car is at Barrett Jackson, if it was stolen from their possession, I know that they have, spectacular insurance and the vehicles are very safe. Once it's in my possession, we have great insurance and the vehicle is very safe. That being said, I always tell my customers that if they can get insurance on it immediately, just by, in Canada, it's different, right? BC, you have the provincially administered insurance program, whereas in Ontario, we're not doing that, right? So the laws are different across the country, but you at least want to get your investment protected, like not for the roads. You don't need liability, but just like a fire, theft, acts of God type policy. I always tell people that it's smart to buy that, because let's say, for instance, our insurance as a transporter would exclude an act of God. So if there's wildfires in California and the truck stop gets evacuated and the truck burns, would my insurer pay? They're going to say that's an act of God. Well, now, if my driver, drove your car and smashed it up and it was a write-off, for instance, which would not happen, of course, but in the hypothetical worst case scenario, that would be covered by me. We can access significant insurance on every single load. But there are instances with insurance, as I'm sure we've all heard the stories, where, I just think it's prudent if anybody ever buys a car in the U.S. that they immediately get insurance. And my father and I both have, kind of an affinity for cars as well. And we have very modest, if you could even call them, collections. And anytime we've ever purchased something in the U.S., we've immediately had it insured by our broker, just to make sure that the investment was safe in case of anything that we didn't think of or that we were unprepared for.
Now, getting back to that Snowbird that's going to ship a vehicle from Ontario down to Florida, what are some of the bigger markets or the most common markets that you're dealing with? The cities like Fort Lauderdale, or what are the big markets for Canadians down on that East Coast? And then we'll talk about the West Coast as well.
So the East Coast, you've got, of course, Miami, South Beach, Miami Beach. Then you've got Lauderdale and Palm Beach, of course. And then on the other side, there's Naples, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Tampa, kind of that side. So there's the East Coast and the West Coast of Florida. Different vibes, I think, on either side, and different depending on what people are looking for with respect to the action or lack thereof. But it's we service the whole Florida state, even down into the Keys. Although that's rare these days. I think the last person we shipped down to the Keys was my wife's grandfather, back when he had his place down in Isla Morada. But he was a fisherman, so he had to be where the fish are. Okay. It's a beautiful state, and there's ton of Ontario and Montreal people down there.
Now, I believe we sent you a contact a couple of weeks ago. There was a fellow down in San Diego was trying to ship his vehicle from Vancouver to San Diego, and I believe it was a Porsche. Are there any restrictions on how those vehicles, from an emission control point of view, are some of these vehicles not allowed to be shipped down to the States?
Absolutely. So there can be problems with certain vehicles. Typically not in a snowbird scenario though. In a snowbird scenario, you do not have to comply with EPA or DOT because you're bringing the vehicle back out. Okay. The vehicle's going in, it's licensed in Canada, it's fit for the road, it has a valid license plate. That's okay. I've never seen any problems there. But when you get into importing the vehicle into the US, if the vehicle is less than 25 years old, then there's EPA, being Environmental Protection Agency, and also DOT regulations that we need to make sure that are being followed, and that the vehicle itself, given the year, make, model, submodel, that vehicle complies with those regulations. And but I mean, for the purposes of our chat, basically about the snowbird situations, no, those cars generally, what we're seeing, the Range Rovers, the 911s, the general cars that our clients who are shipping them to their Florida or California, Arizona homes are driving, we don't see issues.
And that's the biggest thing I didn't even think about, is that people would ship their vehicles for 6 months. Because I live on an island like Maui, it's harder to get that vehicle off and on the island. But you're saying it's very common for snowbirds just to spend it's $2,500 roughly. Either way, it still makes a lot more sense for them just to ship the vehicle down and then ship it back.
Absolutely. If it's for call it $5,000 Canadian for the round trip. But again, it comes into the value, right? It starts depending on what the value of the vehicle is, and sometimes is it worth it? Perhaps not. If you have a $10,000 vehicle, maybe you just buy one down at your snowbird house and leave it down there. But if you have a $100,000 vehicle, you could pay for shipping 3-4 times by the time it really starts to make sense that you'd want to buy that down there. I mean, the numbers just don't add up. So there's definitely a huge market that we've been servicing for people who want to send them down temporarily. And I'm telling you, people love the ability to send their luggage in their car. Air travel's gotten so brutal these days on the commercial side that it's and lost luggage and this, and that people love being able to just throw their stuff into their car, get on the plane with a carry-on, go to their house. They've got enough clothes for 4 or 5 days, and then the rest of the stuff comes down. The golf clubs. We have a lot of people put golf clubs in their car. They'll put, we've had clients put surfboards. They take apart their bike. They put their bike in. There's it's a good way to ship stuff that you don't want to take on the plane as well. If that stuff's under that kind of, it can be under that 100-pound kind of threshold that we try to maintain. It's and U.S. Customs has no problem with it. That kind of stuff. We don't want people sending down electronics or any food or things of that nature, because that can get into a whole other realm of customs issues. But clothing, personal clothing, and your bicycle and your golf clubs, I mean, they have no problem with that.
And like you say, when you that 3 or 4 day trip, however long it takes from Ontario to Florida, trucks are very secure and no issues at all with any kind of personal belongings or anything. No. So, I mean, sorry for interrupting there, but no, being an enclosed carrier, you don't know what's inside our trailers, because we only offer enclosed shipping. So I probably should have mentioned that earlier in the podcast. Our trucks are all closed in, unlike the ones you see on the highway with all those cars hanging off them. Ours, you'd have no idea what's inside the truck. Now, here's the last question before I let you get back to your busy day here. What car events are available for snowbirds in the United States?
So car events in the U.S. For snowbirds, I mean, there's the Barrett-Jacksons, which are huge. One in Scottsdale. There's also one usually in April that is in Palm Beach, Florida. That's an excellent auction as well, and we get a lot of Canadian customers. You've got SEMA in Las Vegas, which I believe is in October or November. That's often well attended. Then you've got Car Week in California, but a lot of Car Week in California is in August. Typically, that's the big one at Pebble Beach at the golf course, and you're seeing the most expensive, beautiful cars ever made at that auction. It's an auction and a concours, which that would be kind of they're showing these cars and trying to win awards. But there's the auction week in Scottsdale in January every year is pretty spectacular. There's about 10 or 12 auctions, and the big one being the Barrett-Jackson. And it's just if you have any interest in cars or Americana or even just having fun with your friends, I mean those auctions during that week in Scottsdale, it's pretty hard to beat. I mean, it's hard for me because I have to work and be able to wake up in the morning and not stay up too late. But there's always we always tend to have one evening where we go out and have a good time with some clients.
And it's also Super Bowl week too, I believe. So that can get pretty crazy down in Scottsdale. Well,
this year we had we had the Super Bowl this year it was this year in I was there actually. And then we had the golf, the Waste Management Phoenix Open. It was like all within a couple of weeks, from Barrett-Jackson to the Super Bowl to the golf. And, it was, for me, I'm not a big golf guy and I'm not a football guy. So it was just annoying that I couldn't get a dinner reservation. But it's good for the city. And, we actually have a house that we bought years ago down in Arizona. And I wouldn't quite call us snowbirds, but we do a lot of business there. So I've spent a lot of time there. I love that city. It's a spectacular place and a wonderful part of the world.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in Scottsdale and Palm Springs and playing a lot of bad golf. So I do enjoy the area as well. But Adam, I really want to thank you for your time today. It's been very interesting. There's a lot of things that I've learned about the process of getting a vehicle down south, and more importantly, that vehicle doesn't have to stay down there the entire time. And if it does, Adam's going to be able to take care of that for you as well. So I appreciate your time and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast. Our app is available for your iPhone and your Android. If you have any questions, call me 604-612-7526. Until our next podcast, I'm Gerry Scott.